Noah.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I'm so excited.
So, growing up, sports obviously probably a really big part in your family as your dad played in the NFL and a Rockies executive. So, was it always your dream to be a sports reporter or did you want to play the sport?
That evolved over time. I think when I was really young, I was a really big soccer player. So I think when I was probably, 8 or 9, I still had dreams of maybe one day being on the women's national team. And that was kind of the original dream of being in sport. And then as time went on and I realized I was never going to be good enough to do that, it kind of shifted. And with my dad's job, he was the president. And so I saw the business side. And so I think I was exposed to a lot of the possibilities on the business side, and there was times when I thought, ooh, what if I could be a GM or anything? I entertained kind of all of those because that's what I saw. And then it was probably middle school or high school watching the Rockies and seeing Carissa Thompson and Alana Rizzo on the broadcast. And that was a female voice and somebody who looked like me on television. And so that really gave me the idea of, oh, that job could be really cool. And I think the idea early on of just being able to kind of be a part of the action and share your love of sport with everybody, which is kind of the medium that television gives you. So it all evolved. I think I considered a lot of different things, but because of the women I saw on TV, that's sort of how I eventually developed this dream. And I'm lucky that it's worked out a little bit.
And it seems to have worked out perfectly because now you're with the Cubs. You're under 30, so that's an incredible accomplishment to already be with the Cubs. And I had read somewhere that you actually wrote a report on Ernie Banks and had a Cubs hat in your room in middle school as well. So it's kind of like this is going to happen at some point.
Yeah,
Almost.
first of all, can I just say that you're complimenting me for being under 30 and being with the Cubs? I need to compliment you because are you 14? Is that
Yes,
what
I
you said?
am.
You're 14 and you have your own YouTube channel. Like, that is more impressive to me than what I'm doing. I think what you're doing is so cool, and I'm so proud of you for taking the initiative and going out there. And I can't wait to see what you're doing at my age because I guarantee you it's going to be way cooler than what I'm doing.
I doubt that you got like the dream job for me here. Um, so I think you answered the this question with the first answer. But did you play sports as a kid?
I did, yes. I was a soccer player. That was really my sport. I played everything though. I basketball. During the summers, it was all about swimming, tennis, and golf. We grew up at the country club and so my parents made us play all of that, which now I'm super thankful that I can play golf because I think that's kind of a lifelong skill. But soccer was really the sport, and I still love soccer. I love watching the women's national team. I went to the same high school as Lindsey Horan, so it's cool because some of the women on that team I played against or know, and so it's really cool to now see them on that stage.
That's
So
awesome. Um, and of course, growing up at the, you mentioned golf there. When you got Ian Happ on the Cubs and you're covering him, I've heard that would probably help with him being a golf fan. And so you mentioned getting into broadcasting in middle school, high school. Did you get any early experience there? And if so, what were some of those memories there?
well, it was certainly not doing what you're doing at 14. I mentioned that. I think the experience that I had early on didn't have much to do with being on TV or producing some sort of broadcast like you are. But I think the experience that was so valuable to me is just being around the sport and learning it through osmosis, just being around the ballpark and seeing the way that players interact with media or seeing the way that players interact with others on and off the field. Like, I learned so much from that and the way my dad operated in the front office and kind of that relationship between the front office and the media. I feel like that was so valuable to me in what I do now. At the time, I didn't really realize how valuable it was going to be, but now I can look back and say, oh, that really helped me. It wasn't until college that I started to do more of the broadcasting, or get it, I should say, it wasn't until college I started getting broadcasting reps, and that was through our local television station on campus. That was huge for me to be able to just be live on TV. I had never had the chance to be live on anything, and so that experience was huge for me. And then this is something that I don't think enough people talk about, but I did a lot of public speaking. And that helped me significantly, just sort of having a presence and learning how to communicate and voice a message. I felt like really helped me. So that was in middle school and high school. And I feel like has carried over into my career and kind of set the tone.
Yeah, and you mentioned that college station, and you went to Arkansas. What made you made you want to go to Arkansas instead of other schools?
So I was born in Fayetteville. My dad was the associate AD when I was there, and so my dad got his doctorate from there. My mom got her master's. So I was an alumni, and so I was able to get in-state tuition because of that connection. And going back to Colorado, where I grew up, I kind of always had this idea and desire in my head to go out of state. I wanted to do something different than everybody. Most of my classmates went to Colorado or Colorado State, and I think I could have enjoyed that, but I wanted to do something different. And Arkansas was the perfect school for me because I had that tie. I was able to get in-state tuition, and it embodied a lot of what I wanted in a college. I wanted to go somewhere where they had big-time SEC sports and go to a school where I felt like I was going to get opportunity to do what I wanted to do, which was get into sports broadcasting, and especially, in the SEC. The level and just passion of sport down there is unmatched, in my opinion. And so that was really important to me. And I just loved the Southern culture was so different than Colorado. And I thought it was really important for me to experience that different culture because you can learn a lot from the way that different people live all across the country. So I loved my time there and super thankful for it.
Well, that choice definitely worked out for you. We'll talk about that a little later. But you mentioned the SEC sports there. It's very competitive, and that had to be fun to be around. And so after that, you worked in local TV for a little bit, and then back to Colorado, where back at Coors Field, you got the job with the Rockies. How did that process go about for you to end up with that job?
For me, getting back to Colorado was interesting. I had gone to Wyoming. That was my first job, Market 196. And then I got the job in Little Rock, which I think is Market 47. And it was all local TV. And I knew I didn't want to be in local TV long term, but I felt like that was the avenue I needed to take to get to where I wanted to go. And ultimately where I wanted to go was network television. And so when I was in Little Rock, the Rockies job opened up, and I had only been in Little Rock for 3 months when that job opened up. So it was one of those things where I'm sitting there thinking, oh no, I just moved to Little Rock, yet my dream job is open. Just the chance to get to a Major League Baseball team I think is a lot of broadcasters' dream. Because those jobs don't come open very often. And once they do, they're very competitive. And so when that job opened up and I kind of realized I had a chance to get it, I knew I had to take it. And I'm so thankful that they took a chance on me and they helped develop and grow me, because when I first got there, it was a learning curve for sure. I had gone from being in local TV, having prompters, and never being a part of a live broadcast where you're producing and telling stories about a live game happening in front of you. And there's a level to that that's totally unscripted, which local news is so scripted. So there's a learning curve there for sure. But I feel like it just getting thrown into the fire, it made me learn. And I'm so thankful for the people around me who showed me grace in the learning process, because I think you need that when you're learning. You need to be able to mess up and people to extend you grace and kind of show you the way.
Yeah, and you mentioned local TV. That's how I know Ernie Johnson started as a weatherman in Georgia. So you got to start somewhere, and local TV seems to be the right route. And so you go to Colorado. And first game as a sideline reporter, just what was running through your mind and how did that broadcast end up going?
So it was freezing cold. It was about, I think, 23 degrees at first pitch, one of the coldest games in the history of the franchise. So, first of all, I'm sitting there. What did I sign myself up for? I'm freezing cold. And I think there's a level of lack of concentration when you're that cold. And so I remember just being like, okay, concentrate. And then, I was very nervous. And so I think I kind of was able to forget about the temperatures and just focus on the broadcast. But I remember my first hit, I felt like I nailed it. I thought it went really well, and I thought my cadence is good. I didn't stumble or mess up, and I was like, I got this. And then my next two hits were a disaster, and they did not go as well. And so it was kind of a reminder early on for me to never get complacent and always trying to push yourself to get better, because I think I got a little bit of confidence, and then I think that confidence maybe made me fail a little bit because I got too confident just in that day. So I remember, it went really well. And then my next few hits, I was like, oh no, that could have gone better. But I was so, so nervous. I just remember, gosh, my nerves were insane. And so I'm thankful that as time goes on, you don't get as nervous and you learn how to settle in and you learn your coping mechanisms and kind of how to combat that big moment.
Yeah, you mentioned that weather there. I've had a couple broadcasts this year where I'm just sitting there, and it doesn't get too cold down here, but with the wind, it can get freezing at night. So that's where, like, your brain doesn't function as well in those situations.
No.
I'm like, that's a challenge, and especially at Coors Field where that weather is just unpredictable. The one game I went there, it was 6:10 was the scheduled start time. We sat there in a 2-hour rain delay. And it was funny because right as we were walking out the stadium, they announced the first pitch. And so we were able to get back in because I had stayed behind being me. Like, my parents just wanted to go to the hotel room with the family. But I stayed back enough to watch a 5-hour-long game and at 2 in the morning watch Aroldis Chapman get his one blown save as a Cub.
Oh, no way. You were there.
Yep.
Wow.
Before the Game 7, of course. But
okay.
That was pretty crazy because we were able to jump right behind the plate. And then it's like, well, that's how often does an inside the park home run end a game? Like,
I know.
That was crazy. So you had some fun times. I remember seeing a photo of Trevor Story getting just dumped with, was it Gatorade or water? And it got all over both of you, and then looks like some bubble gum afterwards.
Yes.
So that had to be amazing. But we'll talk about memories later, because you also got hired by ESPN for a college football sideline reporter, and I saw that was like what you like to do. You said in an article, college football. And so what are some of the differences, though, covering baseball versus football?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that because they are so different. And I don't think I really knew that before actually doing both jobs. I think with college football, what's unique is you cover two different teams every single week. So you might randomly get an assignment of a team who you've never really watched all season long because on Saturday you're working, so you don't have the chance to watch all these games. And so, throughout the week we go back and we watch the previous games and you learn the teams, but you kind of go into each week a little bit blind as to the storylines of each program, and you have to really dive in and know the team just like the people who watch it every single week. So it's a challenge of kind of putting all your energy into really learning these two teams week in and week out. And then so it's a lot of build up for one single game. And then once you get there as a sideline reporter, they always tell us, be the eyes and the ears of the sideline. So it's important for me to bring information into the broadcast and to be able to give things that I'm seeing on the sideline some context. But everything that I bring is not going to get on air necessarily. Like what I see and what I hear and all the things that are happening on the sideline, that takes precedent. So I think there's an ability of a reporter to bring things into the broadcast that nobody else has access to. And I love that aspect to it of, really trying to listen into what the coaches are saying, or to see the way that a quarterback, after he threw a first pick, reacts on sidelines. Like, how does that all fit into the story of the game? And to be able to tell those stories is really fun. Well, with baseball, starting off with knowing the teams, I cover the Cubs every single day. So when I'm going into a broadcast, I don't have to study the narrative of the team because I know it. I've lived it. I've lived what's happening with the team every single day. I watch every single pitch of every single game. And so there's just a comfort to knowing every single thing about the team. Now, with that comes a grind of trying to come up with different storylines each night, and keep the perspective fresh. And that can be a challenge over the course of 162 games to constantly come up with new content. And then once you get into the broadcast, baseball broadcasters and baseball broadcasts in general, they lend themselves to being much more anecdotal than football or basketball or some of those other sports because of the time that baseball has. The time between the pitches, the time between the batters. There's so much more space for stories to be told. And so a lot of the stories that I tell during baseball games have already been talked about with my producer going into the game. So there's not as much of that being down there on the sideline and really being able to bring valuable information of things that I see in the dugout that nobody else sees. Now, there is certainly some of the things that happen, but it doesn't happen as often. So it's a little bit of a different role, both throughout the weeks as you're preparing for the games and then in the game itself.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Cubs here. You didn't spend too much time, only 2 seasons. Maybe was it 1 or 2 with the Rockies before the Cubs come calling and offer you the job at Marquee. What made you want to go get that job instead of staying in Colorado?
It was a tough call for me. I loved Denver. I loved that city. My family's there. I grew up with that franchise. I think there's something about the Cubs, the historic franchise, the very passionate fan base, the city of Chicago, that is so enticing. I mean, I think everybody, if you really ask them, they want to be a part of this. They want to be a part of this franchise that people care so deeply about. And so once I really, got into the interview process, I wanted the job so bad because I wanted to be a part of what this was. And I always said my favorite city to come to as a visitor was Chicago, and coming to Wrigley Field. I mean, there's just something that is so special about walking through the doors at Wrigley, or the gates, I should say, and just, hearing the crack of the bat and the smell of the grass. Like, that to me is what I love about my job. And to be able to do it at Wrigley is very special. So I had to have a lot of conversations to make sure that, is this the right move for me? But I think a lot of people who I really trust, they all said, yes, this is the right move for you. And I believe that. And so that's eventually why I decided to come here. And I'm very thankful that I did.
Well, as a Cubs fan, we're glad to have you. You've been amazing so far.
Thank
and
you.
Wrigley, as you said, it's a special place. That Wrigleyville in general, not just like the stadium itself, but everything outside of it. Like, how many places have rooftop bleachers looking into the game? There's nothing really like it. And so far in your career, you've already experienced so many great things. And whether it's the Rockies and, that a lot of offense there. And, of course, broadcasting at Wrigley Field. Overall, if you take all the experiences and moments you've had, what have been some of your favorite?
So you mentioned the Trevor Story walk-off. That was fun because as an aspiring reporter, you always see those moments on TV. And I think you always sort of envision what you would do in that type of moment. And then when it happens to you, it's kind of like all of your dreams coming full circle in a way. And so that was really special to me because, again, I had dreamt of being in that moment. And so being there was really cool. And I think in 2018, the Rockies have never won a division title, and they were right there with the Dodgers. They went to game 163. And so that run in September was so much fun to be a part of because it was very back and forth with the Dodgers. There was 2 series against LA, they were both in LA in September, and going to Dodger Stadium, and it was a playoff type atmosphere there. Those are the moments that we live for. I feel the same way about the Cubs in the run to chase after the pennant in September. Like, I can't wait for that. We had that a little bit last year, but a lack of fans, so it was different. So I can't wait for September when it's a tight division and you're just holding on to every single pitch. I've loved those moments. As far as college football, I think anytime I get to hold that mic flag and stand on a college football field, I just feel like the luckiest person in the world because it's what I dreamt of for so long. And I remember my very first game with ESPN. It was the SEC Network, and I was doing a game at Mizzou. And early September, it was against Southeast Missouri State. So it was one of those games that you just anticipated a blowout. But there was still a good crowd at the stadium, and it was just a surreal moment for me. And all day long, I was so nervous. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I can't mess this up. You're trying to rehearse all your hits, and of course, they never come out the way that you rehearse them. But that was a really special moment for me. And I'm sure I'm forgetting some because there's been a lot where you kind of have to pinch yourself and just remind yourself how thankful you are to be there. Because I think as a reporter, and I've talked to other women in the industry, my counterparts who say the same thing, we're all very motivated, highly driven people. And sometimes with that comes a lack of gratitude in the moment because you're always focused on what's next because of that drive that we have, which that drive is what's gotten us to where we are. But I think that drive in a way, it sometimes doesn't allow us to really take in the moment. So I do try to take in the moment and appreciate those special times, I should say, because they have happened, and I'm so grateful for them because I used to dream about that moment, and to be a part of them is cool.
Yeah, and there's some amazing moments. I had seen your interview with Chris Bryant where he was talking about having a son. That was just, it puts things in perspective. It's amazing to see the other side of those guys you look up to. And then, of course, when you did the story on me, that was amazing. Thank you so much.
That was my other favorite moment. I'll say that.
All right. That's a good answer. Thank you. And with COVID, though, things have changed, of course. You can't really have as much interaction with the players, and you haven't been going to road games either, so you're reporting from a studio. Just what have some of the challenges been when that's completely different from when you started, and for anyone really?
Yeah, it's been a big challenge. I think when you spend most of your career operating one way and then all of a sudden you have to shift gears and completely change the way you're doing it, it throws everybody for a loop because you just are used to doing it one way and you thought that was the way that it was going to be forever. And so to have to adjust when you didn't predict that adjustment coming, it has been challenging. And I think there's a lot of times where I really miss the old way of being able to go into the clubhouse and talk to 10 guys in the matter of 5 minutes and get little tidbits and stories to add to the broadcast. Those days are not the way that it is right now. And so I think giving yourself grace of understanding that it's okay for this to be really hard. Last year I would get so frustrated because I'm like, I stink at my job, why is this? Why can't I do this? And the reality was everybody was struggling. I mean, all my counterparts across the league were saying, how are you coming up with new stories? How are you doing this? How are you doing that? We all were struggling. And it is a challenge because you don't have the access to the players like you're used to and like we all wish we had. So I think it's taken a lot of creativity. And with that, we've tried things on the air. Some things have worked, some things haven't. And you kind of just, again, it's all part of the adjustment process. And so just understanding that it's okay if you feel like it's really hard. And I think we're all hopeful that eventually it'll get back to more normal and we're going to be able to do our jobs the way that we're used to doing them. And when we get to that point, we'll be grateful for everything we did go through because it's only going to make us better as reporters.
And last year, there were a lot of downsides to it, but I mean, we got to see baseball, and you were one of the few people that were actually in person at some of those games at Wrigley, and we got to see some amazing stuff through the TV, like Anthony Rizzo eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich up in the stands in the middle of the game, or Anthony Rizzo out in the bleachers cheering on his team during a scrimmage. And I remember another moment where they had to guess the attendance up, and that was hilarious.
Oh yeah. Or when Anthony had the hand sanitizer at first base, that was pretty funny.
Never
too.
gonna forget that.
Yeah.
But being one of those few people actually at the game, there's two questions in this. What were some things that we couldn't see on TV that were going on there? And also, I had seen Cole Wright get a Javier Baez home run ball and keep that. Did you ever do anything like that?
I did go out to the bleachers a few times, and there were some home runs that out there, and I went and grabbed the ball. But eventually, they got to the point where they would give those balls to the authenticators, and the authenticators would take them and give them to the Cubs. And I think they were either sold or given to season ticket holders. Can't remember the process. So I was sort of helping in the process of being like, here's this ball from this home run, and that was funny. As far as things that people didn't see, that's a really good question. I think one of the things that people asked me a lot about was the fake crowd noise, because I felt like when I would watch the games when I wasn't doing them, the crowd noise felt so much different over the TV than it did in the stadium. It felt so loud in the stadium, and I would say it felt relatively loud over the TV, but for me, it did feel like a little bit of that buzz, like there was a realness to it. And for some reason over the TV, I didn't feel like it came off that authentic. Mm-hmm. So maybe that would be something that I would point to. I think it was just wild being in the stands, and there was probably, 20 people in the stands, and different front office members or the grounds crew or what have you, and just we all knew we were witnessing history, but it was kind of the history you didn't want to be a part of. You're like, I don't really want to do this. We don't really want to be here without fans, but this is what it is, and so we're going to be grateful that we are here. So it was just a weird sort of presence and feeling that I guess it's hard to describe, but that's sort of what I would say as to maybe what fans at home didn't see and feel was what we felt. And it was just an eeriness, just weird. I can't believe this is happening. This is Major League Baseball we're watching, and there's no fans in the stands. I mean, who would have ever thought that?
Yeah, and I bet for the players it was really weird, but they might have enjoyed parts of it, like getting to see like the fans' perspective there. Players who don't like signing autographs didn't have thousands of people screaming their name. That might have been helpful a little bit getting prepped for a game. But that was really interesting, just thinking about what's going on there, because TV brings you so much, but there's something different about being in person at a game. Mm-hmm. And that had to be interesting last year with nobody there. So I got some would you rather questions to wrap up this interview here.
Cool.
So the first one, the one I ask everyone, tells a lot about a person, is would you rather eat Italian or Mexican food?
Oh, boy. Okay, so I used to say Mexican, but I'm kind of switching towards Italian. There's so much good Italian food here in the city, and I'm hooked, I think. There's this great Italian spot down the street from me with this lobster ravioli that is seriously, I think, one of my favorite dishes I've ever eaten. So on this one, I'm going to go with Italian.
And have you been to Portillo's yet there?
I have, yes.
That is my favorite restaurant in the world.
It's so good. Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree. Everybody always talked about it. So I've only been one time. I need to go back.
Yeah. And you've done a lot of sideline reporting, but I was wondering if you'd be interested in doing like play-by-play, or do you want to stick with this?
I think hosting is more what I have my eyes on right now. I think the thing with sideline reporting, and it's no secret, is you're very limited in your opportunities to get on air and your opportunities to sort of be a voice in the broadcast. And I think as I develop into a broadcaster and I learn a lot more and I kind of develop that credibility, I want to have more of a voice. I want to be more part of the conversation. And so I would love to be a host. I've never really considered play by play. I think with a lot of the women who are getting chances at it now, it sort of makes you wonder, I wonder if I could do that. And I'm never going to say never, but I wouldn't say that's necessarily on my radar right now.
All right, and so at home, rainy day, are you gonna watch a movie or read a book?
Oh, I would say this genuinely is 50-50. I kind of go through moods. I've been really in a reading mood lately where I think in the past, gosh, 2 months, I've read 15 books. I'm hungry for information and kind of wisdom, I would say, right now at this stage of my life, or this season of my life, I should say. So I've been reading a lot, but during COVID, I watched a good Netflix show with the best of them. So I watched a lot of TV and movies.
Well,
So
who didn't?
kind of
It's
just depends.
quarantine.
Right, right.
Yeah, that's when I watched The Office, never going back. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview. I had a blast.
Oh my gosh, Noah, you are awesome. I'm so proud of you, and I truly cannot wait to see where your career takes you because the fact that you're 14 and you're already interviewing Mac Jones is ridiculous to me. That's so cool. So good for you. Proud of you. Keep up the good work and can't wait to see where your career takes you.
Thank you so much.